Much dismayed by the discomfitures of the preceding hosts, the spirits of envy approached. Though they could not estimate the full perfection of the deeds of the Mother of Sanctity, they nevertheless felt her invincible strength. They had seen her so unmovable that they almost despaired of enticing her to any of their wicked purposes. Nevertheless, the insatiate hatred of the dragon and his immeasurable pride would not yield. They laid new plots in order to provoke the lady most beloved of the Lord and of men, to envy in others what she herself possessed, and even what she abhorred as useless and dangerous. They drew up a long list of natural blessings possessed by others and denied to her. And as they thought that supernatural gifts would move her more, they mentioned great spiritual favors and blessings, which the Almighty had conferred upon others and not upon her. But how could these lying representations move her, who was the mother of all the graces and gifts of heaven? For the blessings of all the creatures taken together were less than her single privilege of being the mother of the author of grace. Precisely because His Majesty had so favored her, and because the fire of His charity burned within her, she ardently desired that the hand of the Most High enrich and favor her fellow men so much the more. How then could envy find room where charity abounded? But the fierce enemies would not desist. They pictured to the Queen the apparent happiness of those who, in their riches and good fortune, considered themselves happy and exalted in this world. They induced several persons to approach Most Holy Mary, and describe to her the consolation of being rich and well-to-do. And if this deceitful happiness of mortals had not been condemned so often in Holy Scriptures, and as if contempt of riches had not been the very science and doctrine which the Queen of Heaven and her most holy Son had come to exemplify in their lives for the benefit of the whole world. Those persons who came to our Heavenly Mother were exhorted by her to use the temporal goods and riches well, and to give thanks for them to the Author of all good. She herself fulfilled this duty, making up for the habitual ingratitude of men, although the most humble lady judged herself unworthy of the least of blessings of the Most High. Yet her own sanctity and exalted dignity, in point of fact, gave witness to the words of Holy Scriptures, saying in her name, "With me are glorious riches and justice, for my fruit is better than gold and precious stone. In me is all grace of the way and the truth. In me is all hope of life and of virtue." In this exalted excellence of virtue she conquered all her enemies, astonishing and confusing them by this new experience. For they were made to feel that where they had exerted their greatest force and their deepest cunning, they gained least and experienced the greatest repulse. Nevertheless, the demons stubbornly persisted and proceeded with the seventh temptation, which was that of idleness. They sought to cause in her a corporal indisposition, or a feeling of weakness and fatigue, accompanied by a dejection of spirit. This is a trick of Satan, little known, and under its cover the sin of laziness causes much ruin among souls, and prevents much progress in virtue. They suggested, moreover, that she postpone some exercises on account of weariness, in order to be able to perform them so much the better after having rested. This too is one among many other tricks of Satan, and we do not often discover it or know what to do against it. They also sought maliciously to hinder the Most Holy Lady in some exercises by means of human creatures, whom they sent to visit her at unseasonable times, trying to impede the performance of some of her holy exercises and occupations at the time and hour set for them. But all these delusions were detected by the most prudent and alert princess. She evaded them by her wise precautions, without permitting the enemy to succeed in any of them, and acting in all things up to the standard of the most exquisite perfection. Her enemies were obliged to desist, hopelessly foiled and repulsed. Lucifer was full of rage against his companions and against himself, but in their fury and insane pride they resolved to make one more general assault upon Mary, as I will relate in the following chapter. Instruction given to me by the Most Holy Queen Mary. My daughter, although thou hast only very briefly summed up my lengthy battle against temptations, I wish that, from what thou hast written, and from what thou know otherwise concerning these things, thou learn the manner of resisting and overcoming the powers of hell. The surest way of fighting the demon is to despise him, looking upon him as the enemy of the Most High, who has lost all fear of God and all hope of good, who in his stubbornness has deprived himself of all means of recovery, and is without sorrow for his wickedness. Relying on this indubitable truth, thou shouldst show thyself far superior to him, exalted and unflinching in thy thoughts, and treat him as a contemner of the honour and worship of his God. Knowing that thou art defending so just a cause, do not let thy courage sink, but resist and counteract him with great strength and valour in all his attempts, as if thou were fighting at the side of the Lord himself. For there is no doubt that his majesty assists all those that enter loyally into these battles. Thou art truly in good hope, and in the way of eternal life, glory, as long as thou labour faithfully for thy Lord and God. Remember then that the demons detest and abominate that which thou desire and love, namely the honour of God and thy eternal felicity, and that they are striving to deprive thee of that which they cannot restore to themselves. God has reprobated the demon, while he offers to thee his grace, his virtues, and his strength, in order to overcome his and thy enemy, and to procure for thee the happy end of eternal peace. Only thou must work faithfully and keep the commandments of the Lord. The arrogance of the dragon is great, yet his weakness is greater, and he does not represent more than a weak atom in the face of the divine power. Yet as his cunning and malice far exceed that of mortals, it is not advisable to allow the soul to bandy words with him, whether he is present invisibly or visibly. For from his darksome mind, as from a smoking furnace, issue the shadows of confusion, obscuring the judgment of mortals. If they listen to him, he will fill their minds with deceits and darkness, so that they will neither recognize the truth and the beauty of virtue, nor the vileness of his poisonous falsehoods. Thus the souls will be made unable to distinguish the precious from the worthless, life from death, truth from error, and they easily fall into the clutches of this fierce and wicked dragon. In temptation let it be thy invariable course not to attend to anything which he proposes, not to listen, not to argue with him concerning aught. If thou can withdraw and place thyself at a distance, so as not to perceive or recognize his wicked attempts, so much the more secure thou wilt be for thus looking upon him only at a distance. The demon always seeks to prepare the way for his deceits, especially in souls which he fears will resist his entrance, unless he can thus facilitate his approach. He is accustomed to begin by causing sorrow or dejection of heart, or he makes use of other trickery or snares, by which he diverts or withdraws the soul from the love of the Lord. Then he comes with his poison, concealed in the golden cup, in order to diminish the horror of the soul. As soon as thou notice in thyself any of these signs, for thou hast thy experience, obedience, and instructions for a guide, I wish that with the wings of the dove thou direct thy flight to the high refuge of the Almighty, calling upon him for aid, and proffering the merits of my most holy Son. To me also should thou fly for protection, as I am thy mother and teacher, and to thy devoted angels, and to all the rest of thy advocates in the Lord. Quickly close up thy senses, and consider thyself as dead to them, or as a soul already belonging to the other life, whither the jurisdiction and the exacting tyranny of the serpent does not reach. Occupy thyself so much the more earnestly in the exercise of the virtue contrary to the vice to which he tempts thee, and especially in acts of faith, hope, and love, which dispel cowardice and doubt, and weaken the influence of discouragement and fear in the human heart. The arguments for overcoming Lucifer thou must seek in God alone, and do not disclose them to your enemy, lest he meet thee with fallacies and confusing pretence. Besides knowing it to be dangerous, esteem it as unworthy of thee to argue with him openly, or to pay particular attention to him, who is not only the enemy of thy beloved, but also of thee. Show thyself superior to him, and high-mindedly apply thyself to the practice of all virtues. Be content with his treasure, and withdraw thyself, for the most skilful battle of the sons of God consists in flying furthest from evil. The devil is proud, and is deeply hurt by contempt. In the presumption of his arrogance and vanity, he desires above all the attention of men. On this account he is so persistent in pursuing us step by step, for in his deceitfulness he cannot rely upon the force of truth, but on his persistent counterfeiting of the good and the true. As long as this slave of wickedness is not despised, he never believes himself discovered, and he continues, like an importunate fly, to buzz about the spot tainted by the greatest corruption. Not less warily must thou conduct thyself when thy enemy makes use of other creatures for thy destruction. This he does in two ways, either leading them on to immoderate love, or to undue dislike or hatred. As soon as thou notice a disorderly affection in those with whom thou converse, observe the same precaution as in flying from the demon, yet with this difference, that while thou hate him as thy enemy, thou consider the others as God's creatures, to whom thou must not deny the consideration due to them on account of his majesty, but in as far as withdrawing from them is concerned, act as if they were thy enemies. For in regard to the service which the Lord requires of thee, and in regard to thy present condition, it is the devil who operates in these persons towards separating thee from thy God and from thy duty. If, on the other hand, they hate and persecute thee, answer them with meekness and love, praying for them with intimate affection of thy heart. If it should be necessary, soothe the wrath of thy persecutors with sweet words, and undeceive those who are led astray by false reports. Do this not in order to excuse thyself, but in order to pacify thy brothers, and for their inward and outward peace. Thus thou wilt at one and the same time conquer thyself and those who hate thee. In order to be well practised in this way of acting, it is necessary to cut off the very roots of the capital sins, to tear them out, and to die to the movements of the appetites. For in these appetites the 7 capital vices to which the devil leads men are rooted, and in these disorderly and undisciplined passions he sows the germs of the 7 sins.